Hey there, good morning, everybody. Meteorologist Jim Dickey here in the ABC7 Hurricane Center with another edition of Tracking the Tropics. And unfortunately, it's still busy out there in the Atlantic this morning. We have three storms on the board: Tropical Storm Jerry, Tropical Storm Karen, and Tropical Depression 13. Now, Jerry and Tropical Depression 13, as we'll be talking about, don't appear to be a U.S. threat. Karen is the one we'll be watching as we go through the next couple days as we work through this week. But let's begin with Jerry. There's the latest. The advisory from the Hurricane Center, 8 o'clock, wind 65 miles per hour. That's up a little bit, moving to the north-northwest at 7 miles per hour. Now, this is not, as I said, a threat to the United States. Actually, if I go back to that satellite loop, you can sort of see why on the fringes of Jerry, that little area of clouds, you can track it from the Bahamas all the way back towards Florida. That's the edge of the big old ridge of high pressure that has built into the eastern U.S. It sort of is acting as a front, and that is sort of also acting as a wall. As Jerry moves towards that, it's going to start to steer it out to the north and northeast. So that's where that storm is going to go. Let's look at the cone of concern for Jerry, a turn to the north and then northeast. Now, we're going to watch for Bermuda. I'm going to zoom in here. There's Bermuda. There's the center of Jerry off to the north and west. Now, note, too, the Hurricane Center has yet to really reflect in this official forecast that strengthening systems. This could very well be a Category 1 hurricane off to the north and west of Bermuda once again, not too much unlike what we saw with Umberto as it moved by just about a week and a half ago. So wind, rain for Bermuda. Otherwise, this goes to the open Atlantic, and that's about it from Tropical Storm Jerry. It'll die in the central Atlantic as it moves out over cooler waters. Here's Karen. Was named this weekend the 12th named storm of 2019. And it is very, very disorganized. That's the good news here. There's a whole lot of wind shear getting in the way of Karen trying to come together right now. It is barely a tropical storm. 40-mile-per-hour winds. As we zoom in, so the bright reds you're seeing, that's a blow-up of thunderstorm activity, but it's still all being pushed away from the center. The center is actually right about in the center of your screen right now. And again, that thunderstorm activity is being pushed away from it. So we talk about a healthy tropical cyclone, a tropical system. What it wants to do is take that thunderstorm activity, stack it right over the center. It wants to be vertically stacked, then it's going to start to vent itself in the upper levels, and that's how it is able to strengthen, eventually clear out an eye and become that classic hurricane on satellite. Just not happening right now. So until we see that thunderstorm activity go over the top of Karen, we don't need to worry about it strengthening just yet. And again, big part of the reason why, look at all that wind shear coming in out of the east on the southern fringes of a big old area of high pressure that's sort of prowling over the Caribbean Sea. And as this moves northwards, so too will the shear right there with it. So yes, in general, this is going to head in the general direction of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands as we go through the next couple days here, the next 48, 72 hours. But it'll likely be weak as it does. But there's your short-term steering influences. We have high pressure out over the middle Atlantic. We have another area of high pressure in the Gulf of Mexico, a huge weakness between the two with a sort of dip in the jet stream that is going to allow Karen to sort of follow that path and go off to the north. Again, in the short term. In the long term, that's where some uncertainty is going to come into play. So let's look at these model plots for Karen. And each and every line, more or less, save for a few that are very much outliers and not picking up properly how the atmosphere works. All those lines close together, tightly packed, right over Puerto Rico, perhaps San Juan, seeing the direct center of this very weak and disorganized storm, some heavy rain, the Virgin Islands too. Then it goes to the north, and then check out at the very tail end of this, just about every single one of these models is showing a turn to the left. If you go further north, including this one, this is the H-Wharf. This is a decent hurricane model, showing a more northerly track in this latest run. So too does the UK model, going all the way north to about the latitude of Cape Hatteras. But a good many of them showing a turn to the left. So why is that? Well, as Karen gets northward, eventually high pressure is going to start to wedge its way eastward. Now, so many questions with this. How strong is that area of high pressure? How quickly does it build in? How quickly does Karen move? Is Karen even still with us at this point in time after it moves over Puerto Rico and deals with all that shear? Is it still a surviving tropical system at that point in time? But if it is, high pressure builds in, and there's indications that that would force it westward and bring the U.S. into play potentially. But again, note the time here. This is Sunday morning, so this is this is a week from now anyway. We have a long, long time to watch this thing and sort of hone in on where this is going to go in the long-range forecast. But this morning, the runs of the GFS and the European both show it going to the west. So this is by Sunday afternoon. The European, that white bullseye there, just east of the Bahamas, that shows the center of what would be Karen. And then the GFS showing it a bit further to the north and east. But both have turned this and are moving it in a west-southwest direction towards Florida, towards the Florida Straits. In fact, the latest run of the European brings it into the Florida Straits, then into the Gulf of Mexico. I'm not going to show that to you because I think we're too far out for that to really be anything to really concern ourselves with at this point in time. The point being, lots of uncertainty. Also, as that ridge starts to turn it, likely going to shear it some more. And I'm thinking about this here too. So we have some unseasonably dry air that has worked its way into Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. And as such, this isn't going to be the same type of environment that tropical systems typically find, even this time of year, as they move towards Florida and the Gulf. If any of that dry air is able to stick around to the weekend, which I think it will, that will likely get in the way of Karen trying to come together to sustain itself. So, like I said, whole lot of uncertainty with this storm. What we do know, we're pretty much certain, it's going to stay disorganized as it moves its way northward across the Caribbean Sea. By Tuesday afternoon, that's when we're likely going to see the worst of the rain and gusty winds in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. By early Wednesday morning, it's back in the Atlantic. Now you look at that latest forecast from the NHC, does call for it to start to make that turn and potentially strengthening. That forecast from the NHC calls for a strengthening, Karen, nearing hurricane strength by the time we get to 2 a.m. Saturday. So definitely a storm we're going to keep a close eye on over these next couple days as we sort of hone in on some of those questions, get more of an idea where this is going to go. And I do want you, if you're watching from Florida, the East Coast, even the Gulf Coast, keep an eye on the forecast for Karen here this week as we continue to hone in on it. Now here's Tropical Depression 13, the 5 a.m. advisory, winds 35 miles per hour, so just south of taking on a name when it does, and is expected to later today. It will take the name Lorenzo. The good news with this one, look at each and every one of the spaghetti plots, the tropical models. Every single one shows this turning to the north and west well before it gets to the Caribbean Sea. This is going to be what we like to call a fish storm, not going to impact any land areas. Now, it is going to strengthen, and there's a chance this becomes our next major hurricane of the season. It'll just be one to watch out over the open waters as, again, it turns fairly harmlessly into the central Atlantic and stays out there, swirls around for a couple days. All right, so takeaways. We're watching Jerry for Bermuda over the next couple of days, likely seeing some wind and rain there, likely going to stay fairly weak, but it is trying to power up at least a little bit. Lots of uncertainty with the forecast for Karen. It stays weak as it moves across Puerto Rico this week. There's a chance it could turn back towards the United States. That's what we'll be watching for, and folks from the Carolinas through Florida all the way back into the Gulf Coast need to be keeping tabs on that forecast here over the next couple days. And then we're likely going to see Lorenzo form later on today from Tropical Depression 13. Thankfully, that one not a threat to the United States. So, of course, we'll be watching all of this closely, especially Karen, here this week. I'll probably be back on Wednesday with another video update. Until then, I'm meteorologist Jim Dickey. Have a good day.